Welcome to the Talk and Chatter experience, powered by Gasoline Alley Harley-Davidson. I'm your host, Mick, and on today's show, show number 45, is 4 times World Speedway Champion Greg Hancock. It was an absolute honour to sit down with Greg and discuss the longevity of his career, obviously speaking of the Monster Energy relationship, ProDrive relationship throughout the mid-2000s developing bikes, and all other things that got him into the career that he has had. One thing I will ask is if you get the chance to give us a review on iTunes, maybe subscribe on Spotify or YouTube, and just tell your friends about the show. It goes a long way. So thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoy it, and time to throw it over the show. Thank you. Welcome, Greg Hancock.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, man.
Mate, thanks for taking the time out of your morning. To have a bit of a chat to us over here in Australia. Who's Greg Hancock?
Yeah, first of all, it's my pleasure. And Greg Hancock is a different sort of a character from Costa Mesa, California. Spent my life racing motorcycles. Pretty much got the itch from a very young age. My dad introduced me to this awesome sport when I was about 4 or 5 years old, something like that. And probably from the first time I saw the junior speedway guys roll out onto the track, which would have been in the days of like a Lance King and guys like that, I was shocked. And then from that point on, I never stopped tugging in my dad's back pocket. So, here we are like 45 years later, and just finished doing what I wanted to do, but I haven't finished riding the bike yet.
Now that doesn't seem to be stopped. Like, you're so active still, obviously, on social media and that. Competitive riding maybe in that sort of scene, but you don't seem to stop wanting to ride. That'd be correct, hey?
Absolutely. No, I still love it. I at the time that I retired, I don't know that I was completely fully ready to retire, although there was something in the back of my head that was saying, I think the time is right. But I've missed it every single day since I said I'm not going to do it anymore, and that's just over a year ago now. And but I'm still heavily involved. I'm still very active in it. My kids racing too, so I had a lot of unfinished projects that I was working on, so those are still in progress right now, and trying to do some testing and development work with other things I was working on to help some of the other riders coming up. One of them is Luke Becker, and I have high hopes for Luke, as well as done some development stuff for Magic Yanofsky too.
You've been a big part of Magic's program for a long time, hey?
Yeah, Magic was he's an awesome kid. Everybody knows that I have a soft spot for him. He came around our racing program when he was, I want to say 10, 11, 12 years old, somewhere there. His family were friends with my mechanic, Raphael High, with him and his family. And he pretty much brought Magic in under our umbrella there. And the kid was always hungry to go racing, and he was just, obviously he didn't speak any English at that time, but always there, always smiling, always helpful, wanting to learn, listened so well, and just a kind, courteous young kid, and he's still the same kid today.
He's going along leaps and bounds too, hey? You just see the progression, obviously, the last few years. It's been incredible, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, he's so established now, and he's an animal, he's so fit, and he trains hard, he works hard. His whole racing program is so well organized, and I ran the program that worked really good for me, but the program that he's running is even more so. And probably the fact that he's got to be on the ball, being a young Polish kid, and a Polish rider, and a superstar in Poland, and he's kind of in the national press on a regular basis, so he's got to be in great form and on top of his program.
It's like, obviously America's in the same sort of boat as Australia a bit. That's a little hard to fathom, isn't it, about being a mainstream star in that chosen sport? It's very hard to fathom from our side of the world here.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, and I think you guys are even ahead of us in so many ways. For sure, you are. Uh, we're far away from Europe, where the racing is at its at its peak there, and you guys are even further away. But it seems like you guys have much more of a presence in Europe these days, and on the international speedway scene. So it's tough, being far away. You're everything. It seems to be that little bit harder. You got to leave the comforts of home. You got to leave the culture, the lifestyle, your family, your friends, and food, and everything like that to go to Europe and make a name for yourself. But if you're willing and able, why not? I never really thought twice about it. I just wanted to get my butt out of here and go chase the dream and try to be like my heroes.
How was like growing up in California, like South California there? That must have been especially in that timing. Like you look at culture wise, you just mentioned the word culture. Would have been a pretty cool place to live too, wouldn't it?
For me, it's home, and I probably didn't really absorb all that until after spending some years in Europe and realizing how nice it really is here. And when you go away and you live in other countries and you get used to the culture, you have to absorb it all. You got to go there with an open mind and don't go with tunnel vision expecting everything to be one way. And then I realized, because a lot of people, when you met new people and you were there, they would say, why are you here? What are what were you
Mm.
thinking? Why would you leave Southern California to come to here? But I growing up in it, it's just part of life. It's just home. And as Bobby Schwartz always told me from day one, is he said, just remember, California is not going anywhere. It's always going to be
It's smart advice, eh? It really is.
here. That was the best advice. I think it really was, and it's something that I never forgot. And even when I had, we all have our tough days or dark days, and you feel like, oh man, this is not for me, and I just want to go home. And then you think back, and I go, well, California's not going anywhere. Actually, it's still going to be there as long as an earthquake doesn't come and break it off.
Well, hopefully that doesn't happen. So
No, that's right.
spoke
Then we'll be
of.
an island.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Hmm.
Different sort of place then. Was Bobby Schwartz someone that you looked up to? Obviously, from a kid. Obviously, mentioning that must have been a bit of an idol or some sort of impression. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Bobby was heavily involved. He's kind of almost been a member of our family. My dad got involved with Bobby, and when Bobby was in his late teens and early 20s, and he started coming down to race from he was like from Santa Barbara area, LA, and then he started coming down to spend more time down here in the Orange County area where we are. And my dad ended up helping him out a little bit, and just supporting him, and through all of that time, our involvement in the sport became more and more. Then my brother and my older brother Dave, he got involved in racing before I did, and Bobby was very influential, was very helpful, and was just one of those. He was a role model for us. We all loved the racing, and he taught us the all the techniques. He taught us all the everything around preparing yourself for the races, and how to set up your bikes, how to be a good starter. And he was really good, really hard, really straight, and probably probably didn't have the same way of explaining things that another writer would, but the point always got across because he wanted you to do it in a specific manner. And he just like, you got to do it like this. And he was exactly right. Probably when you're younger, you don't get it. You think, God, he's so hard on me. But in the end, you realize that maybe he's just not the same guy to explain it to you that maybe a John Cook or a Bruce Penhall or a Dennis Segalis or these other guys. I was fortunate to be around a lot of really great people, and but Bobby's words stuck out the most in those early days, and still today, a lot of those words still stick out.
Um, Doing that, is that something now, like in your position of basically influence amongst other riders and mentorship? Is that something that you try and shape yourself to be like, or how do you shape yourself in that regards?
they're my role models. I mean,
Yep.
I can't be Bobby Schwartz and I can't be Bruce Penhall, who's one of my greatest heroes, and Eric Henderson and all these. There's a lot of great names out there who I've, like I say, been fortunate and to be around or to work with, and I've never ever bitten the hand that feeds. I've always looked up to every single one of these guys. So I want to be just like them, but I want to be it my way. And I will. I think that I teach these guys in the same way that I was taught, but of course you have to adapt to your own style and be like Greg. It's the same as teaching the guys to ride the bike. I always tell them too, you can't ride like me, and you can't ride like Darcy Ward, and you can't ride like Ty Wolfenden. You just have to take a little piece of everybody, and bring it into your own program and find what works for you and create your own way of riding or your own technique or your own style and build your own profile.
It makes perfect sense, and no matter where I sort of see or listen to yourself pop up in those places, you're always paying homage or respect to each of those people, which is really cool to see. Like it's not a common theme amongst everybody to pay that sort of homage to people,
Absolutely, and that's been said to me before. But like I said, that's just me, and not everybody's going to be like me. And I'm truly grateful for every piece of advice, help, support, friendship, or whatever that I've had. And that's just me. I say thank you to everybody, and I'm always grateful, and I always want to give back with interest. I don't just say thanks and walk away. I always want to give something back, and it's just me. However they look at it, it's if you just take it with a grain of salt. It's just yeah, I'm appreciative.
What was the first motorcycle? Was it a speedway bike, or was there something else that came into the household?
Yeah, it was a YZ60 Yamaha
Ah,
motocross bike. So I don't remember the year of that thing now because it was my brother's bike, and then it became my bike. So maybe it was a 70, mid to late 70s. This motorcycle, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but and then after that, my dad got me a brand new XR80, 1982 XR80. Was my second
ah.
bike, but I had a speedway bike in between there. He started building that at that time, but I definitely learned on a motorcycle, more of a motocross style bike.
And was that just like generic trail riding or something like that? Yeah.
Pretty much, I was never really on motocross tracks except for when we would go to the motorcycle parks to go ride speedway. There's always motocross tracks, the pro tracks, the vet tracks, the amateurs, and then they had the 80s for the kids and things like that. So we were always riding. We were either trail riding out in the desert or we were riding on some of these motocross tracks just in between doing practice on the speedway track. So the motorcycle parks were great because you could ride your speedway bike, rip through it while they were cooling down. You jump on your motocross bike and go burn laps over at the motocross track. And it was just full solid days of riding, a little bit of everything.
Mate, it must have been a pretty cool time, like to be able to do everything. Basically, it's not one discipline. You're obviously grounding yourself across multiple disciplines. Must have been a pretty good way to lay a grounding, hey?
Man, I can't I can't complain one bit. My dad, he opened up a whole new world for us as kids, and gave us so many great opportunities. Always encouraged us to do other things, not just the speedway. The harder I tried to go into the speedway, the more he tried to push me away. Only realizing that I really wanted to do this bad, and little did I know at that time that it was probably just a test. And I think I passed the test, and I wanted to be a speedway rider.
Jeez, mate.
So yeah, we had it made, man. It was really good times. I almost feel bad that my kids can't have quite the same. We have some motorcycle parks, but not all of them have a flat track where you can just jump on your bike and go and ride a speeder bike and then go jump on a motocross bike. Those days are few and far between, sadly.
Like in the current sort of scene over there, say like a Pala Raceway or something. What is it like there? Can you go test a bike like a speedway, but it'll be a different day or something like that? Is that sort of the way it is these days?
I haven't actually been out to Paula for they have a flat track out there too. They call them flat tracks. They don't call them speedway tracks because they're for the flat track bikes and speedway.
Yeah,
But they have a track out there. But as I understand it, it's not that good. It's not very well prepared. And um, with the motocross tracks, you know yourself that they're out there with a water truck and they keep watering in between sessions, and it doesn't take a lot of maintenance during the practice session. But a speedway track can take a little bit of maintenance because you can just put water on it, but sometimes I think that there's not enough riders that come out to ride, so they really tend to forget about taking care and maintaining the tracks. So they
yeah,
get a little rough, they get a little choppy, sometimes I feel like when they build the tracks that they don't put enough effort into making a good radius in the corners and thinking about the width of the straightaways or the entry of the corners, and they just cut it out and away you go, and they did the same at Milestones for a lot of years. And I ran out there with my kid a few times, and I rode one time, and I think I went on the track one, maximum two times, and it wasn't fun. So I'm not going to do this again. It's no fun for me when the track is so bad and it's just the wrong shape. I don't get excited for that. So I want to go somewhere where I can really open it up and let it rip.
it's kind of like you can excuse it in a time where you can't see other places around the world of what they do, but in an era where you've got the internet to see other places, you should be able to find out what works and what doesn't work quite easily. Hey, without slagging anyone,
You know,
that is a pretty common feel, you know.
you hit the nail on the head there. It's like there's so much information out there, right? And they just built a new track here too at Elsinore. You seem pretty aware of all the tracks out here. So Elsinore, they built another flat track out there, and they're building two tracks. One will be like a quarter mile, and the other one will be just a smaller one that'll be similar to our normal American size. And the same, I can't tell by the shape of it yet. I'm just looking off the internet photos. That my buddy Kelly is running a lot of the show out there, and it looks the same. You're like, okay, they don't have any good dirt on it yet. It's just clay based, but hard to see. It looks like the fairly long straights, pretty tight corners, which can be fun. But I kept telling Kelly too, just make sure you get somebody to go ride around it and just feel the track a little bit. I said, he's been
Yeah,
around enough tracks himself and raced himself. I said, just drive your car on the track and just drive it around and put yourself in race mode and think if you were going into the corner where you would lean into the corner, where you would set it up, kind of twisting your body, and where you would make your apex and where you would drive it out of the corner like this. And just try to imagine it, and you'll get an idea. You can get a feel for the way the track should be set up. And so you don't get this long straightaway and you got to turn it so hard that the bike's going to go backwards or you can't make the corner. Um, Flat track bikes are different, and these are designed
yeah.
for both speedway and flat track. So we come into the corner with carrying a lot more speed than a flat tracker, and those guys come in on the brakes. They're down on the front, steering on the front wheel, and it makes a difference. So, long story short, it's just do your homework a little bit and really try to think about this, and before they make the final cuts, really get somebody that can give you some feedback.
Because there's no universal, is there? There's no. This is the. It's not going to suit everybody, every bike, but
Exactly.
there's like a little groove that you get into, which is the perfect amount for a speedway bike, and then maybe a little tolerance for a flat track bike that's a little bit different, you know?
Exactly right. And like you said, there are no ground rules except for minimum lengths or width of the straight,
Yeah,
width of the corners, and pretty much that's it, right? And then you can get every size, shape, whatever you want. And there's some unbelievable racetracks around the world. And I've been working in Wrocław now in Poland too with the club, and they are very, very interested in even changing their track. And that track is phenomenal right now, but they want to make it even better and asking my opinion and how to change that and what they can do. So, there's still big things ahead and really fun to
uh,
work with people that are just, they're looking beyond all the time. They're not just thinking for the moment.
Tell me about Poland. What's this like? Obviously, that's the scene at the moment, I guess you'd say. What's it like?
Yeah, I mean everybody knows Speedway and they know Poland, and you got the world champion there, and it's all true, man. It's insane. It's you take a guy from Queensland, you take a guy from Southern California, really fantastic places in the world, but Speedway is like it's like a speck on a flower. It's just it's so small for a lot of us. And then you go to Poland and suddenly you are like a superstar overnight. You come into you're in the press, people recognize you in a supermarket, in a gas station, you're driving your car and they're honking the horn when they pass you, and you're like literally you go from you're just a normal everyday John Doe here, and then you go there and you're you're a Zlatan for soccer. You're like it's amazing. It really is. Um it's great. The fans are very passionate about the sport. They absolutely love it, and it's not just guys and girls. I mean, guys at the races. It's guys and girls. It's a real interesting mix.
Mm.
They most of the time Speedway takes place on a Sunday, and it's a very Catholic country, so people get up in the morning, they go to church, they have their food, and the highlight of the day is they finish at the Speedway. And that's no lie, it's they come there dressed like a lot of people just came from church, and you're
Wow.
like, wow, it's pretty serious. And you feel their excitement, you feel their sorrow, you feel their pain when it doesn't go the way they want it to go. And it's epic, man. It really, really is. Great speedway tracks, very, very stiff competition. You have all calibers from kids to obviously very advanced world champions, and they have a really interesting feeding program. So they're bringing the kids up from a very young age, and they're the club scene in Poland is something that's is the key for the success. They have clubs that kids can just you don't come in there and bring your bikes into the club and go racing for them. You actually come there and you have to find a place in the club, working on equipment, learning how the scene works, working with other riders, and you have to be around. And they kind of just if me and a couple of buddies showed up there when we were 10 years old or even younger, uh, they kind of just turn you loose in the workshop in a sense and give you a couple of jobs to do, and they just watch you and see how you work, see what skills you have, if you're good with your hands, if you're not good with your hands. And that's kind of how they fizzle you out, and
Wow.
or narrow you down to where this guy will be a good rider, or this guy would be better just for working with bikes and learning how it all goes. It's really interesting how they do it.
So there's like a grading, not a grading system, but it's like a technical system to get into riding a bike, basically.
Yeah, and a grading system is kind of funny. It's in a sense it is like that. They analyze and they find a place for you, or you probably just end up not being there. You go away where they say, we don't have any use for you. It's kind of a hard school, but it is kind of how it is. It's things are a little bit different today than they used to be because the sport is so professional. You have professional contracts. It used to be very club-like, where every club's got one or two mechanics there that can build engines and do everything. And I feel like that part has kind of been diluted a little bit. It's not as great as it was. However, when I change my hat now, I'm not the rider anymore. I'm a coach, kind of rider coach, mediator. I feel like I'm one of those guys in the club pretty much, and trying to look at the whole picture of these kids that have just shown up there. Wrocław, there aren't that many. There's only a few, and for me, that's what's missing. Perhaps the demand for good juniors. That the juniors are they win the match or they lose the match for the club most of the time. You can see that now in the way the clubs are set up. All the riders are so good, 1 to 5, and then 6 and 7 in the team are your reserves, which are two young Polish riders or under 21. If you don't have two good juniors, you're going to struggle. And the good juniors are getting bought and sold in between clubs, whoever. So their demands go up to a certain extent. However, if you don't have a good junior, they're so nervous that I think some people, they need to win now, right? Once the season starts, if they haven't got the goods, there's nothing you can do really, except I think what we're doing at Wroclaw now is to really working with the younger ones further down the line and trying to develop. We have to think about next year. We can't think about today because today's here. It's we got to think about tomorrow right now and kind of build this and try to create a much longer lasting club. And that's what's great so far with Wroclaw. I'm really impressed. They're very demanding. They're a very professional club. The amount of people that are working in that club doing different jobs, it's phenomenal. It's like a soccer club for Speedway. Everybody's got their place, and it's from media to technical to mechanical to promotion to sponsorship. I mean, it's really, really well organized. And the part that they were missing is having somebody to really develop the youngsters. The team manager's got a lot on his plate, which is Darek Sledge. He's got a mediator. He's the coach. He's the manager. He's got to talk to the boss and make everything work. And if it doesn't go good, the first guy that gets blamed is him, so he gets blamed for everything. And so me coming in there just as an independent coach, consultant for the club, it took time to analyze and figure out who's got what and the potential and what riders are doing what. And really fun to kind of slow everybody down and back up. And we got to think about tomorrow. And in that process of developing and working with these guys, you're starting to see that the youngsters in the team, our juniors are not probably the two best juniors in the league, but by giving them the correct tools, or maybe I can't say the correct tools, giving them some tools to work with and showing them or letting them know how important they are for the team, and that it doesn't matter if you're Magic Yanofsky, Ty Wolfenden, Artem Laguda, Juganov, or Dan Bewley. These are like 5 names in that team, and getting everybody on the same page, working together and talking at the same level, it's just turning things around, and it's going really, really well. That could change, but right now they all understand because Magic comes and he's probably the best one of all of them for the point of he comes to a lot of the practices. He gets out on the track and he practices with the youngsters. He goes to the tapes with them, does starts with them, passes them, gets passed by them, and just rubs elbows with them. I mean, that's the stuff I used to like to do too, but he does it even more so than I did because I was always kind of like, I don't want to get hurt if I do something wrong. But you bring the level of confidence up with the youngsters by going out there and standing next to them going, hey, you want to do a start with me and do a few laps? And suddenly you just see that their shoulders go up and their eyes light up, and bam, you have competition within the team. Every junior rider wants to be better than the next one and helping each other at the same time. It's phenomenal.
Do you feel like 4 world championships, right? Do you feel like that carries some sort of aura around when you're in a place like this that the kids can still approach you? Like, are people nervous or not nervous, but it's such a huge thing to accomplish in a sport. It carries a lot of weight on your own shoulders. Do you feel that sometimes when you're at a place that not that they can't approach, but it might feel a bit standoffish from a kid because they feel that you mightn't be approachable, but you are approachable. Does that make sense?
It probably does. I'm a humble guy, so I don't look at it in such a big way like that. But they were all much more nervous. Not the top guys, but some of them are a little bit more nervous when you first get there because they're trying to figure you out and they're trying to think, oh, what does this guy? He's like maybe a star status to a certain extent, the youngsters.
Yep.
And once they realized that I was a normal guy and that they could approach me, and I never came in and told anybody, you need to do this, you need to do that, you should do this. I'm not that kind of guy. I kind of sit back and watch and see where I can help them and then approach them carefully and promote a little bit of advice and ask them first, hey, can I give you a piece of advice? 9 times out of 10, they say yes, or probably 9.5 times out of 10, they say, of course. And you start from there, and you some people are baby steps, and some people are go for the throat, and they go for it. And it's been, I think that part of it is realizing that I'm on the same team with them. I'm a regular guy. Of course, I've had a good run, and I've got a good history in the sport, and world titles always help. So for me, it's as long as they are open to advice and absorbing it, then I've got plenty to offer.
So is that like a fly in, fly out type? Because we've been talking about doing this for a little bit, obviously. Is that sort of what you're doing now? You're sort of going there for a little bit of time? Is that how it works?
Yeah, exactly. I go there on a week-to-week basis. So I go like the first couple of weeks of the year. I went, probably it was a little bit late, but because of COVID, you can't do too much. So I went for 2 weeks, and then came back here for a week, and then went back I was only scheduled to be there for 3 weeks, and ended up being there 4 weeks. And then they just call me as in when needed basis. And, we have kind of a program that we'll work with, depending on how things keep going in the team. We warmed up in the beginning of the year with the right approach, a good mental approach to the season. And once they get kicked off, kind of just top up a few things, and then come in a little bit later in the year to go in and work on different ideas and approaches that I feel are important for different times of the season, with weather changes and track conditions. There's always something small you can do, and once everybody gets rolling in the season, it's real easy to get complacent and just keep doing the same routine all the time. But you can be one of those guys, or you can still be on a mission to be that little bit better than everyone else.
Intriguing. Yeah, because it's a lot of it would be a fresh way of looking at some of these pathways, I guess, as well, hey?
I think so. I think it's for me, I was crazy, to get into a routine was it's nice to have a routine, but at the same time, routines scare me, because I just feel I don't want to just be doing the same thing every single day. Then it's like going to work 9 to 5, and I never looked at Speedway as a job. It was a career, it was an adventure, it was the opportunity for success. So I was always trying to win, no matter what I wanted to do. And my mechanics probably got frustrated with me from time to time, because I always had another idea and I wanted to make another practice session. And sometimes you only need to go on the track for 5 minutes, and we were done. I just needed to try it and clear my mind. And that's how it worked. But I think a lot of guys these days too, they get so reliant on their equipment that a lot of dudes, there's some Aussie dudes too that you think that you got everything is in your bikes, and if you've got a good motor and you've got a good chassis, that you can win anything. And that's not actually the truth. Everybody's got good motors and everybody's got good bikes these days in the leagues, and you have to be prepared to accept and that you can be better in yourself. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind. And a lot of American guys are like that. There's a lot of British guys the same. And, it's just common. It's just what it is. That doesn't mean that I'm any better. I just worked hard for what I got.
It's a pretty common theme, and you see it. And you've mentioned a couple of different nations there, where the riders finish a year, and then all of a sudden the results were good, but we're going to just go change to something completely different. We're going to get a different tuner, or we're going to do this. That must be, it must be so difficult to go down that pathway.
Yeah, it is. I was a very loyal guy in my career, working with manufacturers and engine tuners, and I was working with one guy. I I never took my engines from one tuner and gave them to another tuner and things like that. I in the early years, you're just trying to figure stuff out and you can't afford to do much. So you're just going to afford to do. But as you get established and you understand how it works, if I was going to go to another tuner, hey, I'm going to try something else. That doesn't mean that your stuff is not working, but it's nice to know what you got. And sometimes you don't want to be left in the weeds, and there might be something out there that somebody's doing that is that little bit different that works really good for you. Might not work good for you, but it works good for me. And I never wanted to be left in the weeds. So I always had to buy something from someone else. Every year I would buy at least one from someone else just to compare what I had and see if there was somebody doing a new technology, and figuring it out. And if it didn't work, then you either gave it back to the tuner or you said, I'm going to sell it to somebody. Is that okay? And I was always very straight like that. Not all of them are like that, but that was just me.
Isn't it one of the special things about the sport that you can do that? Like, you imagine Valentino Rossi now want to try a Ducati tomorrow, or or want to try a Suzuki or something. That's one of the really neat parts about Speedway, isn't it? You can go and buy something different.
Well, those guys are getting paid to ride a factory motorcycle of some kind and development and all that kind of stuff. We're not getting paid by anybody to ride a specific bike. We're getting paid by a team to score points for the team and sponsors. That there's no Jawa had good deals where they would offer, give you equipment, but you could tune it wherever you wanted.
Wow.
However, you couldn't be riding a GM if you're riding a Jawa. You're exactly right there. But these days, I mean, no manufacturer gives anybody anything unless you win a world championship, and then you get, GM, for instance, you get nothing from GM except discounts and support. But nothing is for free from them. You have to win a world championship in order to get free product.
Wow, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, GM has a standing deal with all riders that if you win the world championship on a GM engine, then there's a free product sponsorship for the following year. So, but you have to win before you get it.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big thing to win. How did you make your step over from the USA originally?
I had the first offer went via Bruce Penhall. He set up a deal for me with Cradley Heath, and Colin Pratt was the team manager back then, and they were over here for the World Team Cup at Long Beach in 1985, and Bruce had been speaking with the promoters at that point, and then they came over again in 1988 for the World Team Cup. And by that point, I was a little more established in my 500. I was offered a chance to come over and do a trial run at the end of that year, and which Bruce set up for me. So I set it up for myself and Billy Hamill to go over there, and we did a trial run with Eric Gunderson. We stayed with Lance King and used Eric Gunderson's bikes, and did a trial run at the end of 1988 just to test the water a little bit. And I think they used it as a comparison to see which rider they wanted to take, myself or Billy Hamill at that point, if they had the opportunity for the following season. Mm-hmm. And as it turned out, they had a place available. They offered it to Billy Hamill first, and Billy turned it down. So they came to me, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm out of here. I just went and started in the May of 1989, just a little bit into the season. And when the averages worked out, I think there was a little bit of fiddling there at some point where they were trying to fit it in so they could get me in the team. And then I went and struggled there for some years and injuries and all that kind of fun stuff, but it worked out okay.
Yeah, I was interested to know what the pathway was. How because usually it takes a door to open to get anywhere. I was wondering what that door was. So Bruce saying.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think I don't think Bruce made the phone call. I think that Colin Pratt had contacted Bruce and spoke to him and said, "Hey, we're looking for a new young rider for the team, and what's available? Who do you recommend?" And then of course that's where it all started.
Having in 88, '89 or around that late '80s period there, having the Speedway come to the US. Was there much of a scene there at that time? There must have been a bit to have that happening, obviously.
Things were going good back. We're still, it wasn't quite as big as it was in the early '80s there when we had such a presence overseas. And obviously, Bruce Penhall was winning individual world titles. The American team was winning world team cups and all sorts of stuff. And, but it started to kind of '85, I think by that point, it started to kind of just phase out a little bit. It wasn't quite as big, but there was still a good scene. There was still a lot going on. And we had I think that, there was enough young riders over here at that point. When you look back on it, you had Ronnie Corey was already over there, I think, at that stage, and obviously Sam Malenko, Lance King, Rick Miller, both of the Moran brothers. And I don't want to leave anybody out here. Robert Fetzing, Bobby Yachts. There was a lot of guys there at this point when I went, and it was, to be one of them, you were in good company. There was a lot of Americans on the scene. It was still buzzing, and there was still this. Everybody was trying to get to Europe. It was really tough. There wasn't enough places, and the demands are high. You have to score at least 6 points to get your work permit. And at that time, there was, it was tough to hold a 6 point average. Really, really tough. And it was a good system. We were racing here 4 or 5 nights a week in Southern California. So, for me, riding Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, there was even the occasional Tuesday nights as well. So we were doing the better part of 100 races a year here in Southern California. It was a lot of racing.
Wow, that's really, that's clocking up those hours, hey? Like training time.
Dude, it was crazy. It was really crazy. And my kid just turned 16, so he's getting his driver's license this week. And, we're always talking about summer jobs and earning your money, and you got to get some gas money. And it got to the point where my dad couldn't afford to send me racing anymore. He's like, man, it's expensive to go and do it all, and tires and entry fees. And so, fortunately, from the automotive paint industry where he's from, I picked up a couple of small sponsors that were buying race suits for me or helping me pay for my tires or paying for my entry fees. And then I changed schools to another high school here and had a work experience program, so I could go to school from 7:30 in the morning until 11:30 midday, and I'd go for a half an hour lunch, and then I would go to work. And my mom was working at an automotive paint store too. She managed a few paint stores in her lifetime, and she got me a job delivering paint there. So I started working. I'd go to work Mondays and Tuesdays. I'd work from basically 12 to 5 every day. So then I'd go home, work on my bikes, do my homework, whatever I had to do, go to school the next day. And Wednesday mornings I had to be at school at 6:30 till 11:30. One day a week I had to go for my work experience program and report everything I did over the last week. So for me, it was working. And then on Wednesdays, I'd go to school till 11:30, go to lunch. Sometimes I'd just have lunch on the go because I wanted that extra half an hour of work. And I'd go work from 11:30 or 12, or I'd say basically 12 o'clock until 3 or 3:30. I'd run home, finish putting my bike together, load them up in the truck, and go racing. And Southern California traffic is nothing to play with. It's getting on the freeway at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just murder. And the races started at 8. Had about an hour and a half drive out to San Bernardino on Wednesday night. And then come home from the races, get home 11:30 or something, midnight, strip my bike down, clean the parts, up at 6, go to school, go to work, come home, try to finish it all up, load it up, go racing. Everything was just, I'd get up early in the morning and just power wash it, or wash it, and just get it together and go racing. Thursday night at Ascot, which is another, 40 minutes away. Did the same thing, come home. And then Friday nights was here at Costa Mesa, so I could work an extra half an hour because the track was in Costa Mesa, which is down the street from us. And I had all Saturday to clean everything up and then go racing out of Victorville, which is another hour and a half away. and then Sunday was clean everything again to try to get it ready for Wednesday, and then school, work, and it's just how it worked, and it sounds, when you're young, I was making money, and I was making keep my speeder racing going, but if as I started to get better, I started making money winning main events and being consistent, and then then I was able to pay rent and all that kind of stuff, and away you go.
It's funny when you look like you've lived a life of traveling around doing this forever now. Like, this is forever, but what you do now compared to then, and my own experiences, thinking of nearly what you did there on a small scale of working here and that at that age, but you still had time. Now, if you went to try and do that schedule, you just think, you'd throw your hands up in there and think, where's time now? Hey.
Yeah, because you got to have time for social media too, right?
Of course, you need 20 hours a day. No, but it's crazy to think where you how did you fit that in?
You just did, man. I think at one point there was one of my buddies too, Jesse Finch, who I raced with in junior speedway, and but he went through kind of a tough period in life there when we were in our mid-teens there with school and stuff, and got involved in some stuff he probably shouldn't have done. But at one point I was giving him a little bit of and he would wash my bike for me and clean it up and start putting days a week while I was at school and work, and I'd come home and it would be ready to go, and then it made my life a lot easier, but we had a lot of fun. It's just, that's what friends and buddies and the life experience that we got out of it. And you learned about respect, you learned about having each other's back, and you learned about true friends, what you can do for each other. So it really was a life school in
very
a nutshell.
Cool story, mate. Very humbling story of that sort of era, I think as well.
It was really cool. It was just, when you're young, we talk about it today too. I don't know if you have kids, but when you've got kids, they are so innocent and they speak their mind, and that's really how we should be. So if they don't like something, they tell you I don't like it. Or if they don't like somebody, they say that guy's a jerk, or I don't like that guy. He did this or he did that, or and it's like, maybe it's not the proper way, but they just say it as it is, and it's no big deal. They don't mean any harm. They just say it because I don't like him. You're like, I guess that's kind of true. But my buddies back then, even when they went through hard times, maybe they shouldn't have been doing what they were doing, or they got mixed up, whether it was drugs or alcohol, or didn't go to school, or failing, or whatever. You're like, they should have done this and they should have done that, but you always had their back, and you always tried to encourage them to, come on, bro, and a true friend is, you can give them some shit, and the next day you're still buddies.
100%, absolute 100%. Now, coming from South California, obviously, and some helmet designs over the years, and saying your family was in paint businesses, when did you cross paths? Did you, and when did you cross? If so, when did you cross paths with Troy Lee?
My parents were family friends with Troy's mom and dad, so we're more family friends than acquaintances like that. So Larry Lee, Troy's dad, and my dad were buddies. My dad was a painter himself, custom painting, and did some striping. Never the quality that Larry was, Troy's dad. But my brother and Troy are similar age, a little bit older, and we were friends with another family down in Balboa Island here in Southern California, where my dad was living. My parents were split up from a young age, so we would spend time with my dad down in Balboa. And there was a family called the Busby family, Jim Busby, who was a former car racer, and his kids I raced speedway with too. And they had a house right on the bayfront in Balboa, and with a dock out in front of their house, a really nice area. And Troy Lee's dad, Larry, had a I don't remember how big that boat was. Maybe it's a 50 foot old woody boat. Could be even bigger. I can't remember. I think it always felt big as a kid, but he lived on the boat with the kids, with Troy and his brother and sister. They lived on a boat outside Balboa, and they didn't really go to school. They were taught they went to school at younger ages, but their dad ended up schooling them at home, and for the most part. And then we spent a lot of time down there hanging out with them and swimming in the bay and jumping off their boat and all that kind of stuff. So watching Troy start his business, my dad taught Troy Lee how to paint, which is a real cool story, and it's a very, very small period in life. And my dad would never say that he taught Troy. He taught Troy how to spray with a spray gun, painting cars and stuff like that. And then that's about it. Then Troy went on and, obviously has become something massive. But Troy's very appreciative, and in the way that I think I am with people too. And he's always pays a compliment to my dad and tells a lot of people that my dad taught him how to paint. So he puts my dad on a big pedestal, and he doesn't need to do that, but he does. So you can imagine surrounding yourself with people like Troy Lee goes a long way.
100%. That's a cool story. I didn't know there was that sort of connection. I just thought, obviously, from the area and then some of the helmets you've ran over the years, that there must be some sort of connection there. But that's pretty damn cool.
It's really cool. And Troy, he started in his garage. He moved to an airplane hangar out in Corona, California there. And I started using his visors back, in the early 80s there, mid 80s, when he was working out of the airplane hangar in Corona. So it's been really fun supporting him and watching him grow, because today he's still the same exact guy that he was back then. He's just a hell of a lot more busy. He doesn't have the time that he used to, and has a lot of demand. And but he loves his job, and I think for him, the most fun part about it is working with so many great racers around the world and athletes. And he loves painting. He still loves driving. He loves art. He's an amazing artist, motorcycles and helmets and all that kind of stuff. The guy's he's an artist, and they are different. They are different than you and I.
They are indeed. They fit in a different bracket, but it's a magical bracket,
Yeah, but he's so positive. He's a good energy, You feel like you're walking on air, he has a natural aura. He loves speedway, and he's just it's no wonder that he's friends with so many big names around the world. And people I think you couldn't put a price tag on what he's done for people, and what it would cost to get your paint job on a top Indy car or an F1 driver's head. That was Troy manages to do that just because people want his paint job as much as he likes doing it for them.
Very, very true. Now, for people that are listening to, like, everyone asks Greg Hancock about the 4 world titles and this and that. That's why there's different questions coming through. I wanted to find out things about like Troy Lee and stuff like that. So I hope this isn't boring you either, Greg. I'm just trying to get some just different stuff along the way.
Not at all, man. Guys like Troy Lee, I can talk about all day long. He's been a big inspiration for me. He's helped me a lot. I've worked with him in business and distributed for him in Sweden. And so, I'm a Troy Lee guy for life, no matter how you look at it. I'm the biggest fan. I'm the biggest supporter. And it's a great product. He's a great dude. Really, really is.
Now, how did you come about with Monster? What's the story there?
It's a long story. I'll make it short for you. Just a friend of mine in Sweden had an idea in the early days about bringing Monster to Sweden. When I was based over there for a lot of years, and I thought he was crazy. I'm like, come on, you can't do that. But I think at one point he had a motorcycle business, like a motocross parts business. He was selling parts, and at one point they were buying, pallets of Monster here at one of the Price Club, the big warehouse stores, and buying pallets of Monster, putting them in a container, shipping them to Sweden, and they'd take them to the races, and he'd sell them. He'd probably sell a container load of Monster in 1 or 2 days of racing, and making a pretty penny out of it back when you could.
Wow.
And so as it evolved over the years, we managed to come up with an idea he said, let's bring Monster to Sweden and start the distribution here. So we started looking into it. And one of the first guys I spoke to on the phone was Joe Parsons, Monster Joe. Because Bruce Penhall gave me the contact to Joe. He was already doing a lot of stuff with him, with his kids and their programs. And at that point, Joe was in the marketing side of things, and he couldn't help me too much except point me in a direction that we should go to look into this. And I didn't know Joe at this point at all. So in the end, I ended up going basically through the front door and calling their head offices, and got through to somebody to find out how we could look into this. We had a consortium of people that were interested in being a part of this distribution business. And we got in contact with them. And at that point, as we found out, they were just setting up the head offices in Europe, which was going to be in the UK as it is today. And so we were early to the game. And as it turned out, we managed to set within the next 6 months to set up a meeting with them in London. And we flew over there to meet the new consortium of people, and managed over time. We set up a distribution business with them from like 2008, I think it was. And we had a contract for 3 years to start the distribution with them. And it took off from there, so it was basically learning everything. And we had, myself and my buddy Lars, who was the motocross guy, who had the idea. And then we had an entrepreneur who was great at building the business. And we had a guy from the grocery industry who had the chains to the grocery business. So it started like that, narrowed down to just the three of us. The grocery guy ended up hopping off, and we ran with it for 3 years. And all the it was a blast. I was racing at that time too, so I was doing more of the marketing side of stuff and doing this on the side. But being involved, it was really, really fun learning a new business, distribution, and working with grocery, gas stations, bars, restaurants, you name it. And the gaming industry was growing then too. So it was really fun to do all that, all the activation, all the events. It was a party within everything. It was just a blast. And then at the end of the 3 years, at that point, Coca-Cola was becoming very popular in the business side of distribution with Monster around the world. And we were only one of maybe 4, I think, countries, if I got the numbers right, I can't remember exactly, that had our own distribution, Swedish distribution from a different company. Otherwise, Monster, then Coca-Cola was distributing for them in other countries around Europe. But Coca-Cola had bought a lot of shares in the company and were expanding their distribution. So pretty much at the end of the 3 years, our contract just didn't get renewed because Coca-Cola was taking it over. So that was the distribution side of Monster. Through all of that, I was meeting all of the people. I was advertising for Monster, but because I had a business interest, I couldn't be sponsored by the company. So as the business side of it went out, a sponsorship developed with Joe Parsons, who at that point had just been relocated to Europe and took over a lot of their activation and finding new markets. And Joe came into Speedway, being a Southern California guy himself. He contacted me pretty early, and we started talking about the possibilities of setting up a contract, which I got from 2011. And I had a world championship year that year too. So things started to escalate from there. And I had a great, super successful run with Monster and met some great people, traveled the world, been invited to some insane events that, I probably never would have seen had it not been for Monster. So I'm eternally grateful to them as well, having the opportunity, opening new doors, and rubbing shoulders with some high profile sports athletes around the world. It's been a heck of a run.
That's pretty cool. Like it's not just a sponsorship opportunity. You're part of the brand as a business entity for 3 years. That's pretty big, isn't it?
It was awesome. It was a lot of fun. It's there's a lot of time and money and stuff that goes with all of that stuff. But it was I learned something, and I learned a lot about business, and learned a lot about distribution, and learned a lot about energy drinks. So it was pretty cool, man. And great relationships today, and the company stuck with me through the situation with my wife's illness, and maintained their the last 2 years, which was, it says a lot about the company. They really get involved with their athletes. They're not just a sticker and a paycheck.
No, it's the morals that are obviously there to maintain that sponsorship, and that's pretty huge.
Yeah, for sure. And you know me, I'm not the kind of guy that I don't bite that hand. I do whatever I can, and then some to give back.
Definitely. I seen you. It was the day after you wrapped up your world title in Melbourne. You're down at Phillip Island for the MotoGP. Now, the humble person that you are, I was amazed to stand there and talk to Greg Hancock. It was huge in my own eyes. And the humble person you are said, "Oh, I'm nobody. Like there's Valentino Rossi's and that here in the world. They're the famous ones around here." And I was like, "Wow, that's." Basically, in the hour that we've been talking, that's exactly the person you are. What's some of the crazy times, like you mentioned a few monster sort of dudes there, what's been one of the real intriguing things of a person you've met, an event, something like that? What's been one of the really outstanding events that you've been to, I guess?
It's hard to say which one is the most substantial, but because I, doing MotoGPs in Le Mans and doing Rallycross and doing, I didn't get to do any Formula One with Monster, but done Goodwood, got to ride up the hill at Goodwood during the Festival of Speed, and probably still to the day, the most crazy, radical, ridiculous, insane things I ever did with Monster was going to the Isle of Man and standing next to John McGuinness, who I already knew John. Seeing the Isle of Man and watching it on TV is one thing, but to see it live and to stand next to John McGuinness literally 2 minutes before he took off to go try to set the fastest time around the island again, and see the facial expression and to see his mood change when the 2-minute buzzer went off, and basically put his helmet on, kiss his wife, put his helmet on, say a couple things to the man upstairs, and then get on the bike and take off. Like you felt the emotions, you felt the nerves, you felt the stress, you felt the love, and then just go out there and go like hell for that lap around the island, try to be the quickest dude around there. And going, and they took us around. Gordon Perriman, who's become quite a good friend over the years, as a British guy. I met him at Poole where I was racing there. He lives on the Isle of Man, and he actually picked up myself and Lance King went with me to this, and his wife. And he took us for a trip around the island in his car, and he was at some pretty high speeds, and by motorcycle guys passing us at extremely fast paces, and you go around and you think there's no way this is part of the circuit, and yes, it's insane. So the thing that stands out the most is going through all the streets. You've probably seen Isle of Man yourself, and I mean they're racing on regular roads on the island there, which British roads, for instance, everything's narrow and tight, and there's brick walls, and there's this and that. And I remember there was pads around the light posts. They had pads around these light posts, and then there was, as they're coming down, there's like a brick, an entryway to a driveway, and there's a brick wall here and a brick wall there as the driveway comes down, and you turn in off the street to go in there, and then past brick wall, and the light posts are further down. And there's pads on the light post, but there's no pads on the walls. And I remember I said to Gordon, I said, why are there pads on the light post but not on the brick wall? And he said the rumor is that around the island that the pads are on the light post to protect the light post.
Oh, jeez. What a
So
place,
I was
eh?
like, oh, God. He goes, there's no reason why there should be pads on those light posts because, I mean, the brick wall would cut you in half. But it was just, I just remember watching that and seeing them come past. I got to watch it from Rose's garden there, and we went around different places to see it. And I just remember the sheer panic, and I was so excited, but I was so scared. And just after the thing was over, you walk out and you go sit in the motorhome with, and it's there, and he's hanging out, and he'll have a beer with you after the race. You're like, unbelievable. That will forever be the top thing that I've ever done in my life, without a doubt. And I've done some really cool stuff thanks to Monster Energy.
That's incredible. That's truly, that must be. You've raced speedway bikes for 45 years. To come back and say something like that must have been just next level.
Insane.
Yep. An incredible record that he carried around that place. It was 52 wins or some miraculous thing. For the island.
And how long was the fastest guy around there for a long time? Or set the record. It's just, it's insane.
How far are you into other bike sports? Like, obviously Speedway has been your chosen sport for all this time. Are you into other motorsports for that level? Are you into other stuff as well?
Yeah, but I'm an amateur in everything. I can't say that I'm a master of knowledge on MotoGP or motocross. And motocross, I probably more into than anything because we have so much of it right here on our doorstep, and always supercross from a young age. And we have the Anaheim Supercross, which is just down the street from us, and it's been great. I love that pretty much. I like MotoGP. Probably got more into that as being involved in again with Monster, because you start to get closer to other sports that you don't normally get close to, and then you the real respect for the type of motorcycle racing. Even though I have the respect, it was like opened up a whole new door, and you realize that these guys are all regular dudes like you and I, and they're really, really good at what they do, and they go really fast, and they do ridiculous things on a motorcycle. So and that's just motorcycles. Then you throw the cars in, and with rallycross and even monster trucks. Been to those and done some Formula One in the early years before I even had her. And it's you learn to respect people for what they're good at.
Was four-wheel speedway or four wheels ever an option for you?
I don't think I ever really had the desire to go race four wheels, to really get involved in it. I've always liked it and whatever, but I was so streamlined with speedway and two wheels and sliding and drifting, and that was me. I really didn't have any interest in doing anything else, because I just thought speedway had so, you're in full control. You're just sitting on it and you're moving your body. And I was sliding my bicycles around everywhere at the beach. And that was me, so I didn't really look at anything else. I watched it, and I had friends that did it. This Busby family that I talked about before too, they're all car racers and drag racing, sprint cars. That would have been something I would have liked to have done, but that's basically speedway on four wheels, for me. And we went to a lot of sprint car events here at Ascot Park. My dad used to take us there on Thursday nights and Saturday nights when there were sprint cars. Speedway was Thursdays, and the sprint cars were on Saturday nights. So we did a lot of that too. It was a blast. It's just anything you can do to get sideways for me was what it was all about. So that's probably been my main thing.
It's pretty much been like, for everything that I've seen of yours, that's like your motto. Hey, just be sideways.
Get sideways. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you go away at the end of the speedway season. I put the motorcycles away, and we've usually done all the testing we wanted to do right at the end of the year, so I was still fresh and everything felt good. I didn't want to do
Yep.
testing in the beginning of the year because you're rusty and you haven't found your feet, and you need to get into start riding what you finished on, so it was good then. But I would put the bikes away, and for a good 6 to 8 weeks at least, and didn't touch them. I needed to get away, although in the back of your mind it's always turning. The wheel never stops turning. And the first time I go ride the bikes again after 6 weeks or a month, or 2 months or whatever, I get out on the track, and you always went around slow. I would do two laps kind of slow and just kind of drift a little bit, just make sure I didn't forget how to do it. Get it, but then I would go a little bit faster, and then by the third lap or fourth lap, I was throwing the thing in there and backing it in, and I was like, "This is what life's all about."
Hey, that must be one of the coolest feelings. What does it feel like?
It is. To put that into words, getting sideways. I mean, it's. I always tell my thing is just to say, get on your bicycle and lay out some sand on the beach, or lay out some sand on the concrete, and just pedal as fast as you can and get going as quick as you can, and just lean it over with your foot forward and your weight forward, and let the back end come out. There's just something about that. Whoa, it's the quick whip of trying to control it. And then you add a motorcycle to that equation, and you're doing 75, 80 miles an hour down the straightaway, and lean the thing over, and it breaks into a drift, and then you let it rip, and there's just nothing better than that initial reaction of going in and the bike going sideways and throwing you into the slide, and then you're standing up on it and you're controlling it with the throttle. It's really easy once you get into the drift and once you get it to that point, but getting it there is the hardest part, because you got to trust yourself. The faster you go, the easier it is.
How did your time with ProDrive come about?
It was 2000. Get the year exactly. 2006 or 2008. Maybe it was 2008. There was a guy there that worked at ProDrive at the time. He was a former car nut himself. His name was Lars Sexton. He was working for ProDrive, and I was racing for Oxford. I remember Lars had gotten in contact with me at one point when I was racing at Oxford in those early years, and mentioned that they were interested in doing something. I didn't really know him at that time. I was doing it. It didn't work out. But then a year later maybe, I went to ride for Reading in the UK, and I was at one of the early races in the year, and this guy was calling my name from the side of the grandstands, and or the grass field. He's like, "Great, come here." So I walked over, and it was Lars, and we started to have a chat. And he's a really ambitious, inspiring guy who's spent a lot of time. I think he raced go-karts and stuff with Jensen Button, and grew up with all these guys at that time. And like anything in car racing, it don't matter how good you are if you haven't got the backing and whatever. He was one of those guys, extremely talented, as I understand it. His dad put every last penny he could afford to into the kid, and they didn't get the ride. And but he stayed involved in the industry. Never bitter. He was like, it is what it is, And he ended up in the car industry and was working at ProDrive as a machinist, I believe was his job there. And he was always into the speedway, big fan of it. And he said, "Hey, I like your style, I like what you're doing, and I would like to see what we can do to help you with your bikes and your chassis." And there was a lot of talk about Tony Rickardson at that stage, because Tony was riding with frames built by Penske, and they were very interested to hear. They had some knowledge about this, and they were kind of curious if they could get involved. They would love to be a part of something too, and help somebody. And they said, "You're the kind of guy we like, and how can we help you out?" So it escalated quickly from that first conversation with Lars at Oxford in the pits there, to getting a bike together with Darren Bucock. Maybe you remember Darren. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you. Darren was his dad, Nigel Bucock, was a successful speedway rider. Eric Bucock, his uncle, too. And Darren was a rider who I was buddies with from a very young age because he was traveling back and forth between England and Australia during those years. And he and I and a buddy, Louis Carr, and my mechanic at the time in the UK, we went to Pro Drive. We were invited there. We took a bike and we basically unloaded the thing. I remember when we unloaded it in the parking lot, it was everybody stopped what they were doing, and these are all car dudes, but every single one of them was a motorcycle guy working in a car facility, you know. And we wheeled the bike out, and they all came to gather around and check it out and just trying to figure out how the thing worked. And the guy who was the main engineer, designer behind it, that was friends with Lars and a huge Speedway fan, was a guy named Mick Metcalf. And together, between Mick and Lars, they started this process. We got the bike in there. They put it up into the machine, started taking notes and making measurements. And there's a lot of people that worked there that were involved with this project that became really, really fun. But we slowly tried to rebuild the Speedway bike and change the chassis completely, frame, forks, rear sections. And at one point, the bike was not unrideable, but it was working so good that it was working too good, that you couldn't get the traction you were looking for because it was too positive. It was okay if you had a lot of dirt on the track, but it's pretty interesting that how simple a Speedway bike is, how cheaply made they are, and they work perfectly the way they are. So just got to that point where they started asking me questions about me and my riding, what I was looking for, what I was trying to correct. And from that point, we got into a conversation of trying to adjust the chassis to my riding style and some bad habits that I had that even stemmed back to the U.S. Learned tracks and some of the mistakes I felt that I was trying to correct. I talked about my seat positions and my foot peg positions and raising and lowering engines and trying to accomplish something to stop myself from riding the bike the way I was doing it. And I said, I just can't get to this point. My bikes are good, but I just can't get the traction where I need it, and I overturn it. And then they went to work, and we spent quite some years testing. And I think the frame combination that I have now is about the 6th generation of designs that they were working on, and that became the best one so far. And the first time they pulled something out was the end of 2010. I had already done so much testing, and we made things that were made it really difficult to ride. I crashed a lot because the frame was flexing too much, and then you can have problems with the chain snapping and crashing in GP races in Gothenburg. That I think I destroyed 3 or 4 bikes in the process. But what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger, right? So
Yeah.
by the end of 2010, they built me a chassis combination that I rode the first time in a practice, and I came in and told my mechanics I can win the world championship on this, and they just looked at me like, oh, okay, and I was like, no, I'm serious. I can win the world championship on this. This thing is insane. It's unreal. And then I was world champion the following year.
What a feeling after 3 to 4 years of development and, reworking the wheel, so to speak, to get to that point, eh?
Yeah, you can't reinvent it, but you can rework it, as you said, And we tried to reinvent it in the beginning, and had to where we, it's obviously that was a major contribution. And then putting, we had all the ingredients, we had good engines, we had good mechanics, we had everything, and I think the rider was okay, but at that point they made somebody really special, and I found that I was able to start making changes to my starting technique again and moving myself on the bike a little bit differently than I had done previously, and just always trying to be a little bit better, and I was getting older too, so I realized that you can't just win by turning the throttle wide open. You have to be smarter and a little more calculated and have equipment that works really good for you. So that's where I put my efforts.
Do you feel that there was a time where you found that there was like your peak? It mightn't have been like riding peak, but there was like peak of knowledge. You knew your position, you knew how to start. Just there was like a peak performance. Do you feel there was a certain time that you felt that was the time? Was it say 2011, that title year? Was there any particular time?
2011 went really good, but probably I think 2014 I really started to figure it out because I started to mix with other guys too and work with a fabrication company here in California,
Mm.
Coast Fabrication, who actually was doing business with ProDrive at that time too, manufacturing parts and hardware for the race team, for their rally team and what have you. So together, these guys, suddenly I met this guy here in California who's a guy named Jeff Haywood, car racer champion, IndyCar, everything. And that dude is a wealth of knowledge too. So meeting him and then finding out that he was doing business with them, it was kind of like a really small network of people super far away from each other. But we started working together, all of us. And Jeff did a whole nother my racing we step away from the chassis just a little bit and put more focus in other areas with exhausts and carburation and air filters and wheel combinations. And he was like the king of, he was a sprint car racer, so he was like, rather than working with four wheels, we were just working with two. We had no suspension, so what can we do? How do we get traction to the ground when we can't adjust, we can't adjust any of this kind of stuff? And making power that was usable power, not just raw power. We had to find a way to make it usable. And that's where I think some of the things that we did in 2014, I suddenly just went like, oh my gosh, I didn't know a damn thing about Speedway until now. And I had already won 2 world championships and I was still figuring it out. And all of a sudden it was becoming more and more clear that it really depends on the kind of people you're working with. I couldn't do everything on my own. My mechanics were doing everything we were all getting complacent at one point. And we were making progress, but very slowly. And suddenly it was like they opened a whole new door, and that was crazy. I was testing all the time. And as Jeff always said, he would make something new, or we would test something new, and if it didn't work, we put it in the pile with all the wind chimes. So we referred to that. Well, this one might be with the wind chimes, or watch us go, man. So he
Wow.
he stayed with me right up through the end of my career there, and ended up he sold his business and moved to Idaho and built a really bitchin' new workshop up there now too. So we have just started talking about picking up the pace again and developing for Magic and Luke.
Wow. Tell me this, with the Australian round, it might have been the year that you won the title here in 16. Ty was testing the next year's bikes. I remember this was being like the rumor as such. I never quite understood what that really meant. What sort of things would people test? Like, would it be, like you said, foot peg positions and things like that? Is that some of the changes that would people look at?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, Ty's team seems like he's always trying to do new things, and that's part of it. He knows that you've got to be a step ahead somehow, and he's trying to be change the whether moving weight content on the bike or moving footrest positions, seat positions, handlebars, he's made a lot of changes to his chassis as well, using different materials, I think, and different frame designs. So, something that works just for him. And obviously it's working for him. So at that point, I don't know exactly what he would have been doing, but more than likely he was starting to play with a little bit with different materials. He was playing with positioning. Maybe they had new chassis at that point. I didn't really pay attention what they were doing like that. I never really studied other guys. I just thought if they're doing well and I could see where they were doing well, then I would look for something that they might be doing and think, oh, okay, that's what they're doing. And then you understood if you've already tried it, or if maybe they got a point there, and I wonder how I could marry that into my program a little bit and make it work for me. But it's a never-ending game,
Yeah, and I guess it comes back to just worrying about what's in your own backyard, doesn't it?
Pretty much. And if you're constantly worried about what the next guy's doing, then you're not thinking about what you're doing yourself, and then you're in trouble. But
Yep.
the speedway
Yep.
bike is very, very simple piece of machinery. It's an over 500cc motor in it. No brakes, no suspension, except for a couple of inches in the front. We have no traction control. We have no fuel injection. So everything is still operated right here and right here and the seat of your pants. So that's what I mean. It's not all about having the right frame and the right motor. If you can't ride it, then, you're going to have a tough career.
Out of we won't even just say titles, but what are some of the specialer memories? Like obviously 97, 11, 14, 16 are title years. There's so many other things wrapped up in it. I'd hate to try and get you to break it all down, but what's something that's really special to you?
I think just there's such a combination of things for me. I mean, I met my wife, in between my first two world championships, and that was a big turning point in my life for lots of reasons. And I worked at the same time to Sweden, meeting a group of Swedish guys from the motocross industry, Jeff Nilsson and his father Bill Nilsson, who are both world champions from either motocross world champions or enduro world champions, and learning a whole nother technique, and they changed my thought process on racing completely. So I think at that point, I'm only thing I regret is I didn't win a world championship with those guys, because we should have. But at the same time, winning in 2011, 1 or 2 years after they had finished working with me, it was all part of the process, and one of the guys had told me that, you don't become a champion overnight. It can take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years for some guys to get the experience and the knowledge and how it works. And little did I know, they were exactly right, because suddenly things clicked. I would have anticipated. But for me, those are the highlights, because of the people I worked with that shaped me into becoming who I am today. Whether it was the husband and the father with my wife, she's been my greatest inspiration, and my therapist, and the one who talked me out of not stop racing, 1 or 2 times. And I thought, I've reached my peak, I'm not going to be any better, and you start to question yourself, because you're just, it's not going the way you want it to go. So it's all smiles like this, but when I turn the screen off, you don't get to see what the other side of Greg Hancock.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone's got it, haven't they? There's we see the smiling, we see the grin, but there's got to be a competitor there that is constant as well. That it doesn't stop.
It never stops, and it's still, right now, it doesn't stop. I'm still watch everything, and I pay attention, and I think, he's making a mistake there. This is not going to work. And sometimes you're proven wrong too, and you're thinking, oh, okay, well, that guy must be special. It can't just be the equipment. That guy knows how to use the equipment. And but as a person and mentally, and making good choices and remembering what's going on around you, I put that down to my wife. She has really opened my eyes to communication and understanding, and also the respect of, it's very easy to forget about your family and your friends and certain people when you're so hardcore into your racing, because it is all about you, right? But she taught me how to balance that out, and remember that your kids are still here waiting for you with a big smile, and don't forget that either. And your wife is too.
Yeah, because it's one of those things that you hear. A lot of athletes, motorsports a selfish pursuit, and in some ways, I guess it must be, hey, as well.
Without a doubt, there's a balance for everybody, and I think you probably will hear that. I mean, I've got a lot of heroes out there, and I listen to a lot of podcasts these days, and most of them are with my heroes, the guys that have retired, and some of the youngsters coming up, because you want to hear where they are in their mental state, and where you were, and you see the youngsters in Speedway, and you want to hear how similar it is and where they are in their maturity. And some are amazing, right, at a very young age, and some you can hear are like, he's not there yet, and the aggression and the youth and the testosterone is just like, and at some point they find a way to manage all that and balance it out, and then success starts to come.
For sure. How did it change having kids and being on tour?
Massive. That was you change heavily as a person. You're never ready for kids. I was never ready for kids, never ready. And then, meeting my wife and getting married, I was like, I can probably do this, but a little bit scared, a little bit nervous. What's everybody going to think if I struggle? It's going to be because of me having kids or being a dad and blah, blah, blah. But suddenly when Wilbur was born, it was like, I got all the time in the world and nothing else matters right now, and you were like, then it 100% changes your mentality, your focus, your life perspective. And I definitely took a dip in my racing for a period there and tried to figure it out. But in the end, it was probably the best thing that ever happened, because you realized how to prioritize and how to share the love in more than just your racing world. I had my wife, who I love dearly, and gave her as much time as I could, but having the kids now too, and the dog, and then have come home from the races, I tried really hard. It probably never happened, but I tried to shut that door, leave the racing out here, and have my home life here. But the good thing is, if I was struggling or maybe having difficult times mentally, or just, my wife could feel that, right? And she knew it was time to talk, and so what's up? And nothing. Yeah, right. So what's up? And then the conversation starts, and suddenly you get it off your chest, and you start to talk about it, and you see clarity. And she was a good one for, sometimes when you're around racing people and fans and stuff, everybody wants the best for you, so they tell you everything you like to hear. And my wife was the one who would always tell me the stuff that was probably what I didn't want to hear, but I needed to hear. And that's what puts your feet back on the ground.
Definitely. And there's really only a couple of people that truly understand you as a person.
You said it.
Yeah.
You said it. And you have to be open, right, to accept that criticism. Otherwise, it could be trouble.
It can be tough. I got a couple of little things. How does Speedway in America grow? What's the succession path? Obviously, you're helping out a few riders there, and you're well-established name and that. What's the other methods to make it a larger sport in that country?
That's the $1 million question right there. It's not easy. The world of Speedway here in the U.S. these days has taken a massive hit and difficult. And obviously COVID has really destroyed everything too, and made it really tough. But there's been one or two promoter here who's managed to keep Speedway alive at a reasonable level. That's kind of off the charts a little bit, but it's working. Promotion. The promoters in Speedway here today are different than they were in the 80s, and life is different than it was in the 80s. And it's a lot of competition. There's a lot of things that kids can do, and a lot of sports. And then you have this. So it's really tough to beat with social media, with telephones, with life on the internet, and what's going on. It's people don't. They don't always look for something new. Speedway is really interesting and really fun, but it's not a motorcycle you can buy anywhere. It's a lot of work to put one together. It's still a relatively cheap motorcycle sport or motorsport compared to most. However, to buy a Speedway bike, where do you go, right? There's only two places really here in the U.S., in California, I should say, where you can buy a motorcycle, and really there's not, unless it's a used bike, you have to build it yourself or have them build it for you. So it's not like you just go down to your motorcycle dealer and buy a new Honda or a Yamaha or something. You actually got to pick the chassis that you want, build the frame, pick the wheels you want, put the wheels on, decide what engine you're going to use, get the engine, the carburetor. They're a little bit specific like that. Jawa used to make race-ready bikes you could buy, and they still do, but they're just, you have to make so many changes to them to make them competitive. Although you can still buy one and race it around here, it's missing that. And even in my years of distribution in Sweden too, we tried to build, working with motorcycle dealers with Troy Lee at that time, we were building speedway bikes with bought some engines from an engine tuner in Germany from Tornado Cams and built race-ready motors that were I could win races on them for sure, even at the top level, and put the right carburetors, the right clutches. I tried to build like a motocross version speedway bike that you could buy and go race it on a weekend level and be competitive in many different age classes, kind of a deal. It was going to work. It wasn't going to break. And we built 4 bikes and we placed them in 4 different dealers around Sweden. Speedway's big in Sweden too. So if you walk into a motorcycle dealer and you see a street bike, you see a trials bike, you see a motocross bike, you see maybe a mini bike of some kind or whatever, and then you could see a speedway bike as you walk through there, and put a price tag on it, put all the information there about the bike, gave them the opportunity to a parts list for spare parts and where to get them and how to do it. And not one bike sold, not one serious inquiry. People walked in, looked at it, sat on it, never asked anything more. And
Really?
sat there for almost a year and a half. No interest whatsoever.
Yeah, just such a huge, you go and put in a distribution type service like that and have one person come and look at it, and that's it. It's crazy.
Yeah, hardly at all. So I mean, we can sell the bikes afterwards and get our money back, but on the speedway market. But to put them in the dealers to try to create something new, and probably perseverance and doing some much more, activation and promotion. We probably could have bettered that. At the same time, when you got zero interest, it's really hard to get interested to put more into it too.
It's a two-way street. With the calendar for this year, how do you think would you have enjoyed that?
I would enjoy it for sure. I think that what they're doing now, I like this 2-day system because it's obviously you're there. You can plant yourself there for a weekend, right? You can be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday, because they still do Poland on some Sundays too, which makes it hard. But having a 2-day format, I think is awesome, and reducing the number of practices, so you get one practice and then race. I really like that. Or practice in the morning of both events would be awesome, and then race in the evening, I think would be phenomenal. But I liked it last year when they did it, and I think having it the way they're doing it again this year, they've got to do it to comply with COVID regulations, because things are still not 100% back to normal yet. So I like it. I think it's going to pay off. It's probably a money-saving or a more economical way to do it for riders, for the fans, for the promoters. It's probably what the sport has needed, and gives people the chance to go take a vacation in Poland or Czech Republic or wherever they're going to do the rest of them for sure, because nothing is really concrete yet. But that you can go to the GP, you go to Poland for the weekend, and you can see 2 events. Instead of planning, you're only going to see 1 event in Poland this year because you can't afford to go twice.
I like it, and you touched on you enjoy the Supercross and the motocross. They'd sort of done that with their structure for Supercross this year, and it was awesome. I actually quite like the way it's done, and it's sort of the same idea, different obviously countries and such, but same sort of concept, double headers and that. It works really well as a fan.
I would think that the riders, I mean, I haven't listened to anybody in a podcast or anything yet talk about this yet, but I would imagine the riders would like that too, because it changes their training techniques too, and gives them a little bit more time after an event. As long as they don't have to be at, and one of my buddies is here locally. He's in the works with KYB in the suspension side. So him being away from home for 2 to 4, 5 weeks sometimes, staying in the same hotel in one place, he's like, after a while, you're like, you got to get out of there. It wears you down because you're living in a hotel room, and you're eating out all the time.
No, that makes sense. Well, mate, I'm gonna leave it there. We've banged on enough for the last few hours. It's 3 a.m. on Thursday morning here, and it's probably about 10 there. So, genuinely appreciate everything so much from what you've said and everything, Greg. And when I reached out to you, like, this is show 45 of Talk and Chatter. When you wrote back to say you'd be honoured to be on there, mate, you made my day. And talking to you for these few hours, I really genuinely appreciate it. So thanks heaps, mate.
It's a pleasure, man. And again, I really appreciate the fact that you brought it into show number 45, man. That's awesome. So thanks for the offer. I wish you all the luck with this, and know that I'm always here if you need to talk some more chatter. I'm pretty good at just talking.
Awesome, mate. No worries. Well, we'll leave it there, and thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll catch you around.
Take care, guys.